Hello everyone, Ember here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one, I'd like to talk about the many different lanterns of GLC. So what is GLC for those of you who don't know? It's a single prize only, no Roblox format. It is singleton, except for basic energy, so one copy of special energy and so forth. And it is only one type per deck, so you can only use one type of Pokemon. So, for example, lightning, if you're picking Lanturn. So I won't spend too long on these guys, but there is a few notable Chinchus that we can kind of shine a light on, no pun intended. They're nothing too crazy, and to be honest, I don't think it's going to absolutely destroy your deck if you don't run the right Chinchu or whatever. But just some notable ones if it's interesting. Like the one on the far right has some fun spread applications with Spark, but the funny thing is there's not really any lanterns that actually interact with spread damage. So, make of that what you will. It's a bit of a weird choice, to say the least. But yeah, the other Chinchus are kind of good for control, but aside from that, nothing really outstanding or too crazy. First up, though, is we have a Lanturn from Plasma Freeze, and I'm going to be brutally honest with this card. It is awful. There are way, way better Lanturns for both lightning and water energy, so, really don't need to spend too much time on this. 60 for a special energy is okay, but it's at 1 energy on a stage 1. There are way better attacks out there. Yeah, do not need to spend that long on this card. Next up is we have a marginally better one, I would argue, just because Dive could potentially, lock your opponent out the game, I guess, preventing all damage done to this Pokemon on a coin flip. However, it's for a water energy, so you have to kind of shoehorn in water energy into your lightning deck. And if you really, really want to do that, there is just better lanterns that interact with water energy, as we'll see in a moment. So yeah, Dive, not particularly great. It's a very cool card though. I do like the artwork, but yeah, not a very good card, sadly. Next up is we have a one from Sun Moon base set. Now this one says for a lightning double colorless, 60 damage, and if it has any water, it does 120 instead, which is decent, and it's actually marginally more payable, I guess, than the one we'll look at much later on this video, which does 200 for one lightning, another lightning, and then one water energy. So this one is arguably more payable, just because you have that choice to alternate between water and lightning energy in those two colors. But aside from that, it's obviously a lot less damage. It's not as good. The first attack, sorry, is just not particularly great either. Like confusion's okay, but your opponent will likely, retreat or evolve. So, I mean, it can be good, but aside from that, nothing really too crazy here. So yeah, it's an okay card though. Like I would say there are way worse cards to play in GLC, but there's also just way better ones, to be honest. Next up though is we have a really cool one actually from Celestial Storm. Has the ability Energy Grounding, which will essentially allow you to conserve energy when when your active Pokemon gets KO'd, which is really nice. It does mean you can also power up Lightning Strike to either 70, or you can fork out the very expensive effect of discarding all lightning energy. So even if you've saved up like 5 energy on this guy, you do have to discard all 5. You can't just discard 3, which is a bit of a pain, but it does do 140 if you do that, which is pretty solid damage to be dealing on stage 1. But typically, what you want to be doing with this Lanturn is just using its ability, because you have attackers like Raichu with Powerful Spark, which I think is probably the best partner for this guy. Probably wrong on that. There's potentially just better partners out there. I've not been able to find anything that really interacts with his ability too much. But I do think it's one of the best ways of utilizing it, and it's definitely a cool ability to have. It's also a very cheap ability to have, and just a cheap Pokemon. So, nothing too crazy, but nothing terrible either. And some very cool artwork, I'd add. Next up, though, is we have a really annoying Lanturn from Lost Thunder. I say really annoying because both of its attacks are very annoying. Signal Beam 50 and Confusion. Don't like dealing with Confusion, and it also does damage. And then Salvage, shuffle 4 item cards from your discard pile back into your deck. Now, you don't have to get just Crushing Hammers and Pal Pads, but probably will be. You could also get stuff like Electro Power, which is a very, very good card for Lightning types. If you don't know what it does, it basically just increases your Lightning type damage by plus 30 for a turn. So a very, very strong item and worth recycling. So yeah, definitely a lot of good targets for this, and it kind of just puts a lot of the other control lanterns, I guess, to shame. So if you want a good control lantern, then this is probably the best one. Next up though is we have a slightly worse control one. This one is, it's okay. I think the other one that we just looked at is miles better personally, but this one's alright. You get to look at your opponent's deck, the top of their deck, as often as you like actually, which is quite nice. And then Swirling Flow does 50, and you may have your opponent shuffle their deck, which can be quite annoying. There's a lot of effects that allow you to search your deck for cards and put them on top of your deck, so you could disrupt your opponent in that sense, and you could also control what they draw effectively. But aside from that, I really don't think this is nearly as good as, being able to recycle a load of items to reuse them. So yeah, sadly, nothing too great there, but, not the worst thing in the world either. It's all right, it's okay. Next up, though, is we have a one from Zonjil base set, which I do think is quite interesting, actually. For lightning double colors, does 90, and your opponent reveals their hand, and if you find an energy card in there, which is probably quite frequently, your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed. So you do have to start viewing this as an effective 2-hit KO against most Pokemon, assuming your opponent has an energy. And there is some ways of guaranteeing this, like Surprise Box is the most obvious one that comes to mind, which allows you to put a card from your opponent's discard pile into their hand, although I might have to verify that because Surprise Box might just be a trainer. I think it's any card, but if I'm wrong, then it's probably just a trainer, and that's really annoying. But either way, I do think this attack is very fun. It's a bit risky because, of course, there's no guarantee your opponent will have an energy. Sorry, so then you might not do the Polaris, and you're only doing 90. But it just seems like a very, very strong effect trying to make work really in GLC. Definitely think there's maybe better options, and there's certainly better lanterns, but at the end of the day, quite a fun card to try out at the very least. Next up, though, is we have a one from Evolving Skies, and this one is just a bit boring, to be honest. Like Binding Beam, generic 40, defending Pokemon flips a coin. If tails, that attack doesn't happen. I would say that's way worse than Dive because it just means your opponent can find a new attacker, basically. It's just like, ugh, why would you want to do that? So, yeah, I definitely don't think this card is very good. It's also just a wee bit boring. There's not a lot of flavor to this card, so yeah, bit of a shame, but a bit boring. Next up, though, is we have one from Silver Tempest. Does 160, discard 2. Very plain, very generic. You could play this if you want another big beatstick Pokemon, but there are Raichus that do like 200 for 3 lightning energy and discard 2, so not really sure why you'd pick Lanturn over Raichu unless you really, really wanted to run both, which I wouldn't recommend, so bit of a shame, but yeah, Lanturn, nothing too crazy. Then we have a one from Paldean Fates, which for 2 lightning and a colorless, which probably should be water, because if you have a water energy, it does 200, which is plenty of damage. Now, how are you getting that water energy on this guy? Probably a manual attachment, and then just like Flaffy the rest, or Meganzone the rest. It's probably the best way of doing it. Could use Generator. You can't accelerate water with Generator, sadly, but you can still get some lightning energy on it, which would be good. Then you can take advantage of effects like Lana, deal 50 damage to your Pokemon that have any water energy attached to them, which would be quite nice actually. But yeah, Aqua Spark, a lot of damage to be dealing with. So yeah, seems like a pretty good attacker overall. But yeah, thank you for watching. I do a new set review for GLC with each new release, latest one being Shrouded Fable. So do subscribe if you're interested in being updated. This is now a series to stay, so do let me know which Pokemon you'd like to see. There is a bit of a list that I'm kind of like slowly working my way through, like for every 2 or 3 videos I do these, I get like 4 more suggestions, but there is a list, but getting through them and the playlist has been made. So, let me know what you want to see. And if you want to dive into the competitive side, I would recommend Omnipoke and the format creator Tricky Gym. They've both done fantastic videos and guides for each type. But yeah, either way, thank you for watching. It's been Empower, where you'll be playing Lanturn in GLC, I guess. And yeah, let me know what you think down below, and thank you for watching.